Hey guys, how's it going? I am Dankonia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Yes, hello everybody, and what a week it's been in the Overwatch League. It's certainly been eventful, hasn't it? There's been some massive upsets. But to start this off, there's a bit of news, right? The transfer/signing window is now open. Teams can sign players, whether that be from other Overwatch League teams or whether that be free agents. There is already a transfer going through, but I will get to that later on in the video. But the first, week 3's results, should we go over? And it was a big first day for the London Spitfire. They had 2 games this day, and they started off against the San Francisco Shock. They beat them 3-1. It's not really surprising that they beat them, but it is surprising that they dropped a map. I thought Shock would win this 4-0, so this was a bit of a surprising result. Then we go on to the other big guns in the league. Seoul Dynasty taking on the bottom of the league's Shanghai Dragons. Again, this ended 3-1. Expected it to be a 4-0. Shanghai did look slightly promising. They took a map off Seoul Dynasty, which we really didn't expect considering the power that Seoul Dynasty has right now. Then we had the Battle of Los Angeles. We had the Gladiators taking on the Valiant. This was a cracker of a game. The LA Gladiators took a 2-0 lead at half time, but Valiant came back and it was another reverse sweep like we saw last week with the Philadelphia Fusion, and Valiant won it 3-2 in the end. Valiant looking very strong. You've got to say that they are the best Western team right now because of the mishaps that Dallas Fuel have had. Then, big upsets came in. We had a next batch of fixtures and the London Spitfire were taking on the Boston Uprising. The Boston Uprising beat the London Spitfire 3-2. This was a big head to take down by the Boston Uprising. This is a big statement from the Boston Uprising. They're not to be messed with. They've taken down one of the best teams in the league, if not arguably the best team in the league. 12 players on that team. That team could not take down the Boston Uprising. It was a close match. Let's not say that. It was a close match. But London Spitfire fell. They got their first loss of the season, which is nothing to be sniffed at, Boston. Nothing to be sniffed at whatsoever. They must have been very overjoyed. Then, the Philadelphia Fusion took on the New York Excelsior. The Excelsior lost. The Excelsior lost to the Philadelphia Fusion 3-2. Another big upset straight after the Spitfire match. Massive. Absolutely massive. 2 very strong Korean teams given their first defeats of the season. Very interesting. Go and check those games out if you haven't. The VODs are up on Twitch and the Overwatch League website. They are not to be missed. Then, the last game of that day was the Houston Outlaws taking on the Florida Mayhem. There were no surprises here, unfortunately. The Houston Outlaws beat the Florida Mayhem 4-0. Florida with some problems still. And they are beating teams like Shanghai and giving other teams a run for their money, but they're not quite to playoff potential yet, in my opinion. Moving into the next batch of fixtures, I'm going to do the next 3. Now, this was the big blockbuster match of the week. The Seoul Dynasty taking on the New York Excelsior. If the New York Excelsior could not take the Seoul Dynasty down, what team could? Well, Seoul Dynasty have their first loss. The New York Excelsior beat the Seoul Dynasty. This is massive. They beat them 3-2. The Excelsior bounced back from their surprise defeat by the Philadelphia Fusion. Seoul, they looked like they could bleed. They looked like they could be defeated. Seoul have to bounce back from this next week. Now, this will be interesting, and when I get to the fixtures, you'll know why, because it's a big week for Seoul next week, I think. Then we had the Philadelphia Fusion in action again. This was an interesting one. They were up against the Shanghai Dragons, and it was 3-2 to the Philadelphia Fusion. it was a lot closer than I expected it to be. Considering the Fusion's magnificent performance against the Excelsior, I expected this to be a 4-0. It wasn't. The Dragons gave them a run for their money. They took them to a 5th map, but in the end, Dragons still have not won a game. They are still all losses, the only team to still be on all losses, because the Dallas Fuel turned up at last. Yes, that was the game. They took on the San Francisco Shock and they beat them 3-0. Yes, the Shock got a draw on one of the maps, but the Fuel finally got a win, which is crucial, absolutely crucial, can I tell you, when it comes to the next 2 weeks. So this leads me on to the last 3 games of the week, and the first one of these was the Dallas Fuel taking on the Boston Uprising. Now I thought, considering Fuel's result against the San Francisco Shock, we would finally see Fuel kind of pick up some results here. Actually, they dropped the game against Boston Uprising. They lost 3-2. It was a big fight, but Boston came out on top, and it was quite surprising. I thought Dallas Fuel might actually start to turn up, but they didn't. They still got issues. But hopefully the signing of AKM, which I'll be going on about in a minute, will help them, because the transfer window is obviously now open and has been. You can sign free agents from the 22nd of this month, and the players will not be eligible for actual play in the Overwatch League until the 21st of February, which is the start of Stage 2. Then we move on to the Los Angeles Valiant taking on the Florida Mayhem. There wasn't really any surprises here. The Valiant beat Florida Mayhem quite convincingly, although Mayhem did take a map off the Valiant. I thought it might be a 4-0, but hey, that's how life goes sometimes. Then we have a bit of a surprising result. This game was expected to be quite close between the Los Angeles Gladiators and the Houston Outlaws. Well, the Houston Outlaws are on a bit of a run lately, and they beat them 4-0. The Gladiators didn't really turn up. We expected them to do something a bit special in this match, and they didn't. But there's nothing you can do about that. It just wasn't the Gladiators' day. The Houston Outlaws are looking incredibly strong, and they pick up the 4th spot in the league right now. Talking of the league, I have done a bit of creating with my fingers, and I have created this for you. This is the current league standings, but it also includes map difference, which could come in handy. Well, it's going to come in very important later on, and it could be important at the end of this stage, because if you look at the Houston Outlaws, the Los Angeles Valiant, the Philadelphia Fusion, the Boston Uprising, and I suppose you could include the Gladiators and the Shock in that, although they're currently quite outsiders, map difference could come into could be really important when it comes to picking up that 4th spot for the Stage 1 playoffs. You've got to expect that perhaps Seoul Dynasty, New York, Excelsior, and London are probably going to be in those playoffs, but Houston are actually catching them up. If you look at the map difference, Houston have a better map difference than London Spitfire and Excelsior. They're only being pipped by Seoul. So this is very interesting. It's all the 4 rows that Houston have been picking up. It's doing their map difference a lot of good. And it's going to be very helpful for them in the long run. Valiant, however, they've been getting a lot of 3-2s or 3-1s, and therefore they haven't been getting the real clear 4 rows that have been giving them the big map difference wins. So the same can go for Spitfire as well. 8 maps lost. Kind of more maps than we perhaps expected. We expected to be more dominant than that. Again, look at Seoul Dynasty, only 5 maps lost. The big worrier is Shanghai Dragons. They've only won 4 maps throughout Stage 1 so far, and they have lost 21. It's minus 17 map difference. They are going to fish bottom of the stage. You've got to say that, I think, now. Unless they really turn things around in the next 4 games. I don't see them doing much. I will try and update this every roundup video to make sure that you can see the map difference, because currently the Overwatch League don't actually offer it on their website. And I think it would be a pretty helpful thing if the Overwatch League could include that on their website, because, of course, map difference can come in very, very important in the later stages. So there were the results for this week. Now I go into next week, and I want to do a bit of an announcement kind of thing. In the recent stream, the last batch of games which featured the Dallas Fuel versus Boston game, it was announced that the Fuel are about to sign AKM, a new player in the transfer window for Dallas Fuel. He is a French DPS player who's known for his Soldier 76 McCree and Farah play. This is a good signing for Dallas Fuel. They will need this going forward. They're a bit weak on the Soldier 76 side of things. AKM was playing for Rogue previously. Obviously, Rogue don't exist now. But this is a really good signing for Dallas Fuel. They needed to make changes. They need something new for Stage 2. And I believe AKM won't be available until Stage 2. But that's that out of the way. Now we go on to the fixtures for next week. Now this is a crucial week for Stage 1. This is the week before the last week. Week 5 will be our last week. This is week 4 coming up. Some of these games are must-wins for teams who want to get into the playoffs for Stage 1. Now, the LA Valiant will take on the Philadelphia Fusion on Thursday, February the 1st at midnight. This is obviously GMT time. This is big for the Valiant, because the Valiant and the Philadelphia Fusion are looking very interesting at the moment. This is a big match in my opinion, because the Philadelphia have been punching above their weight. They've been causing some upsets. They didn't expect to be where they are, but currently they're in the playoff places. They have taken the place of the Dallas Fuel. So this will be an interesting map. I think an interesting match. I think these could be taken to 5 maps. It will be interesting to see. After that game at 2 AM, approximate times obviously, because we don't know whether it will go to 5 maps. We don't know how long these maps will be. So again, these are approximate times. The Florida Mayhem will take on the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, the Florida Mayhem are a bit of a weird one. It took a map off the Valiant, but I still expect LA Gladiators to win this one. I just don't think Florida Mayhem are quite up to scratch. I think they need to add something to their roster in this window, in this transfer window, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but they need to add something. Plus, they only have 6 players, so if one of those players gets ill, gets injured, they are in poop street, is what I'm going to say. After that, we have the Houston Outlaws taking on the San Francisco Shock. I would have thought the Houston Outlaws will win this one and cement their place in the top half of the table in those playoff places currently. And then after that, at 10 o'clock, there's a big gap. It's technically a next batch of fixtures. These are technically the Friday fixtures if you're like in America or something. The Philadelphia Fusion will be taking on the Dallas Fuel. This, again, a big match. If Dallas want to turn things around, they need to win matches like these. I don't think Dallas are going to do anything Stage 1-wise. I could see them ending the Stage 8-2, something like that, because they're struggling, and they need the reinforcements, and they need to get things right. And in Stage 2, we may have some meta changes anyway. So, normally I would pip Dallas Fuel for this, but I think the Fusion might cause something interesting. It does also depend on map pools, because obviously these teams prepare for these matches. If the map pool for Philadelphia against the Valiant is completely different to the map pool for Philadelphia versus Dallas, Philadelphia are going to struggle to prepare for these because they're so close together. It will be interesting, but I would kind of pip the Fusion for this. It'll be interesting anyway. After that, we have the Excelsior, New York Excelsior, taking on the Shanghai Dragons. I don't expect the Shanghai Dragons to be doing anything here. I expect Excelsior to win this quite comfortably. A 4-row maybe, or if the Dragons are on point, then they might actually take a map off them, but I expect New York to win this. Then, I would say the blockbuster match of that week goes on. 2 AM on Friday, the February the 2nd approximate time. London Spitfire taking on the Seoul Dynasty. This is big. Big match. I can't express how big this is. I cannot pick a winner for this. I cannot pick a winner for it. Honestly, I'd like to see London win it. But I cannot pick a winner. If London win that match, Seoul have got work to do. because if the results go how I would expect them to go, that would mean that the Seoul Dynasty would be behind London Spitfire and the New York Excelsior in the table. It's obviously, they can work that back quite easily. They're Seoul Dynasty, come on. But London Spitfire have such a diverse roster that they could cause the Dynasty some problems. Because the way to beat the Dynasty is to be unpredictable. And that is something the London Spitfire are very, very good at. But that is probably the blockbuster of the week. Then going into the last block of fixtures on my little screen, and on your little screen right now, San Francisco Shock will take on the Florida Mayhem at midnight on Saturday, the February the 3rd. This should be an interesting match. This I'm expecting to be close. I think Florida will turn up for this match. It'll be a very interesting match, this one. I'm really not sure where to pick, to be quite honest, for this one. I want to say Shock, but again, we haven't really seen much from the Shock right now. So, this could be an interesting one. Seoul Dynasty will take on the Houston Outlaws at 2 AM. Again, another interesting game. This is a big teller for the Houston Outlaws. Can the Houston Outlaws compete for the higher places? There's a top 3 right now. You have your Seoul Dynasty, you have your London Spitfire, and you have your New York Excelsior. Then you have a little group below them of the Philadelphia Fusion, the Los Angeles Valiant, the Houston Outlaws, and I believe the Boston Uprising are in there. I will just check. 2 seconds. This is a really, really bad thing to be doing in the list. Yes, it is Boston Uprising. So, this will be a big teller to see if Houston can compete up there. And we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, after that we have the LA Gladiators taking on the Boston Uprising. Boston have looked stronger than expected. I would expect Boston to win this. But the Gladiators could push them to 5 maps. Although I would pit Boston. Boston's dive, they rely heavily a lot. Heavily a lot? They rely a lot on dive. And if dive was to suddenly change, if the meta was to change from dive to, say, Meatball Moira, then Meatball Moira can't be played on all maps either. I should make that clear. But if dive starts to fall off slightly, then Boston may start to see a lot of problems because they rely so heavily on dive. But I would expect Boston to win that one. The last 3 fixtures, 7 o'clock on the Saturday, we have the Shanghai Dragons taking on the London Spitfire. Again, I am not under any illusions. I would expect the London Spitfire to win this, if not 4-0, 3-1. The Shanghai Dragons, they've got a lot of problems. They need to sort them out. I'm not going to keep going over it. After that, we have the Dallas Fuel taking on the New York Excelsior. Now, this is the weird thing with Dallas Fuel. They tend to turn up against the bigger teams. They turned up against Seoul, they turned up against London. So, I think they will give Excelsior a run for their money, but I expect Excelsior to win. It could be 2-1, 3-1, something like that. But I think Fuel will take a map off them. Let's say that. Remember, there's no XQC for Fuel right now, because XQC is banned for Stage 1. The last game of the week will be the Boston Uprising taken on the Los Angeles Valiant. Again, this is a test for the Boston Uprising. I would say right now that the Valiant would win that. But if the Boston Uprising can beat the Valiant, then that's a big statement from Boston saying, hey, we beat London, now we can beat the Valiant, take notice of us. This could be a big teller for Boston, and it could get them right up there in the league. Plus, another note on the London Spitfire Seoul Dynasty game. If Seoul lose that game, that opens the door for someone like the Valiant to challenge Seoul, because they will be very similar on their standings. Whereas the London Spitfire and New York Excelsior, I would expect to have that little edge. Again, the same goes for if London Spitfire lose that match to Seoul. It's going to be a very difficult prediction when I make that prediction that day, because I would say, my head says Seoul, my heart says London. It's going to be a very, very interesting game. But that's the week 4 fixtures, and obviously the week after that will be the last week of Stage 1. We will get some blockbuster games, and we will get our Stage 1 title matches with prize money. There is a prize pool of $125,000 on offer for those Stage 1 title matches. And I believe those take the shape of... I'm not sure how those work. I will get that sorted before the video before that, if you see what I mean. Before the week 4 results, the week 5 look at video. I'm really scuffed this one, by the way. Anyway, that is the fixtures for week 4. It's going to be an interesting one, and it's going to be a teller to see if some teams can properly compete with the big 3 Koreans. The thing to take away from this week of results, though, is everyone's saying, all the Korean teams have been beaten now, right? They are not lying. One thing I look at in the results, though, is who they were beaten by. London Spitfire were beaten by Boston, a Western team. New York Excelsior were beaten by Philadelphia, a Western team. However, Seoul Dynasty were beaten by an Excelsior Korean team. This tells me that Seoul are still slightly better, simply because they have lost to a Korean team. That actually, some people actually picked Excelsior for that match anyway. So it's a big teller when Seoul go up against Houston, I think. I think that will be a big, big teller this week coming up. And obviously this London Spitfire game is going to be a big game anyway. But for now, thank you guys for joining me for this Overwatch League Roundup video. I will be back next week with the week 4 results and the week 5 fixtures, along with those big matches which will take place on the Sunday. The prize pool matches for Stage 1. Until then, I'll see you then.